Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu sallam wa barak ala abdih. Sallallahu sallam wa barak ala abdihi wa rasulihi nabina wa imamina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. The faida today, this morning, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, speaking on Surah Jumuah from summarized Tafsir Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وهو تحت العنوان طبعا، والعنوان ليس من أصل كلام المؤلف، الجمعة والأوامر والآداب يوم الجمعة. قال رحمه الله تعالى فيما اختصر: إنما سميت الجمعة جمعة لأنها مشتقة من الجمع، فإن أهل الإسلام يجتمعون فيه في كل أسبوع مرة بالمعابد الكبار، وفيه كمل جميع الخلائق، فإنه اليوم السادس من الستة التي خلق الله فيها السماوات والأرض، وفيه خلق آدم، وفيه أدخل الجنة، وفيه أخرج منها، وفيه تقوم الساعة، وفيه ساعة لا يوافقها عبد مؤمن يسأل الله فيها خيرا إلا أعطاه إياه، كما ثبتت بذلك الأحاديث الصحاح. وقد كان يقال له في اللغة القديمة يوم العروبة، وثبت أن الأمم قبلنا أمروا به فضلوا عنه. واختار اليهود يوم السبت الذي لم يقع فيه خلق آدم، واختار النصارى يوم الأحد الذي ابتدأ فيه الخلق، واختار الله لهذه الأمة يوم الجمعة الذي أكمل الله فيه الخليقة، كما أخرجه البخاري ومسلم عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال: قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: نحن الآخرون السابقون يوم القيامة، بيد أنهم أوتوا الكتاب قبلنا أو من قبلنا، ثم إن هذا يومهم الذي فرض الله عليهم فاختلفوا فيه فهدانا الله له، فالناس لنا فيه تبع، اليهود غدا والنصارى بعد غد. ولفظ البخاري وفي لفظ لمسلم: أضل الله عن الجمعة من كان قبلنا، فكان لليهود يوم السبت، وكان للنصارى يوم الأحد، فجاء الله بنا فهدانا الله ليوم الجمعة، فجعل الجمعة والسبت والأحد، وكذلك هم تبع لنا يوم القيامة. نحن الآخرون من أهل الدنيا، والأولون يوم القيامة المقضي بينهم قبل الخلائق. So Ibn Kathir, may Allah have mercy on him, he says here, speaking on Jumu'ah and the commands, the manners, the do's, the don'ts, the etiquette of Al-Jumu'ah, and the virtue, the excellence of Al-Jumu'ah. And that's a reminder that we all need the khatib, the mu'adhin, the Muslim who comes, that it's not a normal day. It isn't an average day. It isn't a tradition or a custom. And you being invited to Jumu'ah, sitting there, is a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not owe you. Allah does not owe you to be here, to be alive. Obviously, we see in the news how many Muslims have died in the last 2 to 3 weeks, in the thousands. Obviously, we've seen in the news the amount of Muslims who have been injured. And when we say injured and wounded, we say over 7,000 people in Gaza and in the West Bank have been killed, and 14,000 wounded. The word wounded, يعني جرحى، هذا يدخل فيه فاقد رجل، فاقد يعني بعض الرأس، فاقد أجزاء من جسمه. That they can be missing a leg, missing an arm, serious damage to your eyes, your ears, your insides, in which you can't go to Jumu'ah. And the situation there, لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله, they'd blow up the hospital. And the situation there, there is no checking out and going home. Like in America, the doctor releases you today. Khalas, you can go home. There is no home. The home that I had is gone. So there is no leaving the hospital. So you having the ability to come to Jumu'ah healthy, safe, sound, these are blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not owe us. So being alive, having the ability to come to Jumu'ah is a tremendous ni'mah. And this is because Ibn Kathir says, from this is Jumu'ah was called Jumu'ah because of collection, congregation, jama'ah, to gather, to congregate, to bring things together. Okay, so the people of Islam, they gather on this day. They unite on this day in the big masjids, bil ma'abid al-kibar, i.e. the little smaller masjids, the musalliyat, should not be used for Jumu'ah unnecessarily. فَلْيُبَلِّغِ الشَّاهِدْ مِنْكُمْ الْغَائِبِ المصليات والمساجد الصغار يعني إنما يحرص على الجوامع الكبار. Okay, on the day of Jumu'ah, these small masjids should not be operational. The Muslims should minimize their masjids and musallas and congregate as much as possible. So if there's a really big masjid here, and there are smaller masjids that they pray Jama'ah, Fajr, Dhuhr, Isha, those masjids should be obsolete on Friday. And the 3 or 4 smaller masjids should go to the bigger masjid. But obviously the Muslims being split up, we can't pray here because your aqidah is this, or your politics is that, or money is this, or race. You're Arab, you're African, you're this, you're that, I'm this. Allah, subhanahu Allah mustaan, how we become split up. But the Muslims are supposed to minimize Jumu'ahs. Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, and Allah Azza wa Jal, during this day, all of the created beings, كَمُلَ فِيهِ جَمِيعُ الْخَلَائِقِ, everything was completed and finished on this day. Whereas this is the 6th day that Allah Azza wa Jal used to create the heavens and the earth, in which Adam was created, in which he was allowed into Jannah, in which he was sent from Jannah. The day of judgment will be on Jumu'ah. And Jumu'ah is so special is that there is a time in which whatever you ask Allah for, He will give you. Any goodness that you ask Allah for, your dua will be answered. Sa'atul ijabah, as is proven in the authentic ahadith. Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, and the word Jumu'ah, the concept is very old, very ancient. The terminology may not be as old as ancient, but the concept is old. So back in the day would be called Yawmul Aruba, the day of Aruba. And it's been established, it's been proven that Jumu'ah was mandatory upon the previous nations. The previous nations had to pray Jumu'ah. فَضَلُّوا anhu, but they went astray. They were not blessed. They were not gifted like the Muslims were gifted to keep Jumu'ah. So the Jews, they chose Saturday, which is a relatively insignificant day in comparison to Jumu'ah. Adam wasn't created on that day. And of course, the Nasara, the Christians, they chose Sunday, which is the day in which the creation began, in which it started. But we chose, and we were given and had the ability to choose the day in which everything was perfected. So Jumu'ah is the crown jewel of the week. Okay? He then says, rahimahullah ta'ala, so therefore, Allah Azza wa Jalla, He gave this ummah Jumu'ah, in which all of the created beings were completed. As is established in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, on the authority of Abu Hurairah, the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam said, "Nahnu al-akhiruna sabiqun." He says, we are the last, but we are the first. On the day of judgment, we will be the first, even though we came last and we were the last. The Jews and the Christians were given the scriptures before us. ثُمَّ إِنَّ هَذَا يَوْمُهُمَ الَّذِي اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ. And they fought, they argued, they bickered. Listen carefully, O Muslims. When we fight and argue and bicker over our petty squabbles, we lose out. And that's a lesson with regards to history. What is happening in the world today, often or much of it is based off of the Muslims fighting and bickering and squabbling over who's this and who's the chief and who gets the money, and no, it has to be like this, it has to be in my name. So therefore, everything is taken away. So the Prophet ﷺ, he says, this day it was obligatory upon them. فَرَضَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ. This was the day in which they had to respect Jumu'ah. فَاخْتَلَفُوا. But they differed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He guided us. And the people will follow us. The Muslims will be superior over the Jews and the Christians. The Jews are a day before and the Christians are a day afterwards. That's Imam al-Bukhari's wording. Imam Muslim's version states, Adallallahu, is that Allah? Listen to this hadith. Adallallahu, Allah sent them astray. People today say you can't say that. You can't say that Allah misleads someone. Allah guides. But you can't say that Allah misleads someone. Adallallahu, Allah sent them astray. Because they were disrespectful. They wanted to argue. They wanted to fight. So Allah, He took it away from them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He misled them from Jumu'ah. The Jews take Saturday and the Christians take Sunday. Okay? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave us the best day of the week. وَكَذَلِكُمْ تَبُعُنَّنَا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ, and they will follow us on that day, even though they received their books before us. So we are the last in this world and the first in the after world. And this is one of the major arguments that many Jews and Christians make. They say that Islam took from Judaism and Christianity. Muhammad, he just took the Old Testament and the New Testament. A person may say, he's a faithful servant of God. I don't need to be a Muslim. I believe in God's oneness. I don't fornicate. I don't steal. I don't rape. I'm a good person. And khalas. I don't have to be a Muslim. Islam is afterwards. And the proof that it's not obligatory, or the proof that it's inferior, or the proof that it's false, is that it came afterwards. And obviously that rationale makes no sense. Just because a person is older or been around longer doesn't mean that it's best. That's first and foremost. Intellectually, logically, that's not a condition. Secondly, is just because you had something prior, that doesn't mean that you were doing the right thing. And that doesn't mean that you were upholding the teachings. So you coming before the Muslims, quote unquote, the Jews, that's shame on you. Is that you had the knowledge for all of these years. You had the prophecy for all of these years. And look, the Christians, you have this heritage, you have this background, you have this lineage. Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. And look, so Islam, no doubt about being superior, the Muslims coming last on the timeline, but the very first. So this one hadith here can clearly show you, you can use this against a non-Muslim to say, hey, look, I agree with you, okay, no doubt the Jews, Christians, but for argument's sake, this clearly shows you that we're superior. And look at the days of the Jews and the Christians. Around the world, there's nothing like Jumu'ah, nothing. Even when Christians go to church on Sunday, it's not the same as Jumu'ah. The Sikhs, they have their holy day, they have their special day. It's not the same as Jumu'ah. Unless we aren't upholding Jumu'ah. And our Jumu'ah is just a custom. You go to the masjid, you get some sweets, and you go right back. But if we're actually doing Jumu'ah how we're supposed to be doing it, the superiority is crystal clear. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for blessings during this day and acceptance during this day. We ask Allah to keep us to be from this ummah and to preserve the blessings that Allah has given this ummah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.